I am for the child who has been abused, the child who is afraid to go home,
who thinks it's her fault,
who is forced to keep a secret or else.
I am for the child who has been neglected,
the child who does not know where his next meal is coming from,
who must fend for herself and her little sister.
Alone. The child who has never been to a doctor or a dentist.
I am for the child who was taken away
for her own protection.
The child who is now in foster care, who does not know how long he'll be there,
or who these people are,
or if she should trust them. I am for her.
The child who is in his third,
fourth,
fifth,
sixth foster home this year.
The child who has attended 4 schools in 2 years.
Who sits in back of yet another class surrounded by strangers.
Believing in his heart that no one
cares. I am for her. The child who has never been told
that he is loved.
That she is smart, beautiful,
talented,
worthy.
That she is strong,
courageous.
That she is somebody. I am for her.
The child who one day will turn 18 and will be surrendered to the world.
I am for that child.
So I am there for that child.
To listen to her.
To speak for her.
To champion without compromise for what's in his best interest.
Because if I am
there for her, I know she will be half as likely to languish in foster care.
And that much more likely to find a safe, permanent home.
She is the child I am for.
He is the child I am for.
They are the children I am for.
She is the child I am for.
The child I am for is him.
Who am I?
Who am I?
Who am I?
I'm a CASA volunteer.
I am you.
CASA stands for Court-Appointed Special Advocates. As you probably guessed by that video, we train community volunteers to advocate on behalf of children in foster care. Children in foster care we'll go into today are in the system through no fault of their own. They've been abused or neglected in their family of origin, and then the situation became so egregious that the state made the determination, and the courts made the determination, again, we'll talk about this, that they needed to be removed from their home. And so they find themselves in a complex system, which any legal system is complex, but the family law, and especially when it comes to SINC cases, child in need of care cases, it's especially complex because you've got multiple players from all different directions, and then you've got children whose voices easily get lost. And so that's where we step in. We provide a voice for that child in the court system. CASA advocates' roles are twofold. So the first one is the one that you probably think of if you think of this sort of thing, or was kind of obvious from this, is a bit of a mentorship role. We are often the only one-on-one relationship that a child in foster care has with an adult. So, they might have multiple workers through the Department of Children and Family Services. They will probably have multiple foster homes. They may switch schools. Everything is in flux when you're in foster care. But if we're doing our jobs right, you have one CASA. And that stable adult presence makes all the difference in a child's life. The other part of our role, though, is investigative in nature. Because we are court appointed, we are privy to all aspects of a child's case. We are able to gain access to their educational records, their medical records, anything and everything that we need in order to determine what is in their best interest. So that's another thing that sets CASAs apart. We are the only person in that courtroom who is advocating on behalf of a child's best interest. The child, of course, has an attorney in the state of Louisiana, but in this state, as you're probably aware, an attorney is required to advocate for their wishes, their client's wishes. And so, as you may remember from when you were a child, or if you've been around children, wishes and best interest aren't always the exact same thing for a kid, right? And so while their attorney plays a very important role, and often we're advocating for the same things in court, sometimes we're not. And it's important to have that best interest voice represented as well. And then of course, parents' attorneys are advocating for what the parents want, and the state's attorney is representing what the state wants, which both of those things are not always, sometimes they are, but are not always in a child's best interest. But that's the role of the court. The judge is sitting up there, and the judge is supposed to be determining what is in the best interest of the child, which is why CASA was started in the late 70s. In 1977, a judge in Seattle basically was sitting there making these very important decisions about a child's life, seeing them once every how often? I mean, this is before ASPA, which is a law we'll get into, so who knows when the last time was that he saw this child? Who knows when the next time he's going to see this child? And he's making these huge decisions that are going to impact the trajectory of this kid's life, right? And he's like, I don't have enough information to be comfortable with these decisions that I'm making. And so he came up with this brilliant idea. I know, I'll get some volunteers to be the eyes and ears of the court, which is exactly what he did. So that became the first CASA program, and then they sprung up all over the United States, and there's almost 1,000 of them in the country now. But he said that, he wasn't sleeping at night, but then once CASA was started, now there's thousands of people across the country who aren't sleeping at night. He sleeps just fine. So, thanks. So, back to the role of a CASA in the court. A CASA volunteer, through their investigation, so they're going to everyone who's involved in this child's life, whether it's school therapists or teachers, whether it's the foster parent, they're investigating everything that's going on, and they're measuring it against the case plan that the Department of Children and Family Services has developed. And so they're saying, is the case plan being followed? Is it a good case plan? Is it covering everything? Do we need to add some things? Do we need to take some things away? And this isn't just based on their opinion. It's based on the research that they're doing. So when it comes time to go to court and go stand in front of the judge, CASA submits a written report to that judge stating what they believe is in the best interest of the child and backing it up with the facts and the research that they've done. And so addressing each one of those items and saying, based on this, I think this, and I recommend that. And they're very careful to keep their own, there's one section where you can sort of put your feelings in it, but the rest of it needs to stay very, very objective, because the judge is looking at this and the judge is making some very serious decisions about what's in the best interest of the child based on this document. As you probably also know from going through information about the law, usually if you enter a written document, that would not be considered testimony. That would be considered hearsay, correct? Well, because of the way CASA is written into the Children's Code, our written reports are considered testimony by our advocates. And then, of course, the judge can pull them onto the stand, or anybody else in the courtroom can pull them onto the stand, the other attorney, and ask further questions and ask them to elaborate on things. But that is considered their testimony, which is a pretty powerful place that we have in the court system. So I handed out this one right here. Does everybody have this? Do you have another copy of this one by any chance? There you go. Okay, this is a really good simplified overview of the entire cycle of foster care on one page, which is a bit ambitious, but it works pretty well. So we're kind of just going to go through this flow chart. Please raise your hand and ask me questions. I'd like this to be a bit of a dialogue if you have questions and you want to talk through things. Trust me, it's complicated even if you're working in the system. So hi, there's an hour and I'm just going to spew all this information at you. Please ask questions and ask for clarification. But let's start with, say, you're a mandatory reporter. So mandatory reporters, as you're probably aware, are folks like teachers, therapists. I'm a mandatory reporter, you're a mandatory reporter, you're probably a mandatory reporter. Not sure who else the rest of you are, but mandatory reportage of child abuse. Basically, if I suspect child abuse, it's not my job to figure out if it's true or not. If I suspect child abuse as a mandatory reporter, I have to pick up the phone and I have to say, I suspect child abuse in this particular case and give as much information as I have. It's not on me to do the investigation and figure out what's going on. That's the state's job. It's my job as a mandatory reporter to say, something doesn't quite feel right. Go figure out what's going on. So at that point, somebody's made a phone call. It might be a neighbor, it might be a teacher at school. Somebody has picked up the phone and said, something's not quite right in this kid's life. I don't really know what's going on, but I think somebody needs to look into it. The child told me something, I saw something, that sort of thing. When you pick up the phone, that goes to the Department of Children and Family Services. They are able to triage your phone calls to a certain extent. In other words, the minute you call and I'm DCFS, I don't have to hang up the phone and then dispatch somebody to go look for it necessarily. They look at how critical or how acute it looks like. So if somebody says, it's 2 o'clock in the morning and the child is wandering around in the middle of the street, okay, you would go right this minute. If somebody calls and says, they've shown up for school several times, I don't think their clothes have been washed in 3 weeks, I really think, they're not eating, it looks like it might be neglect, that they have up until 3 days. I'm not saying that specific case, but in general. There's a sliding sort of timeline of 1 to 3 days for investigation. But everything is supposed to be investigated within 3 days. And they're allowed to sort of say which one is which. So they come out to the house and they do their investigation. We have judges in every parish. In Loving's Parish, we have 2 that hear safe cases. Those judges, one of them is on call at all times. And so if a child investigation worker from DCFS goes out to a home, assesses the situation, you're gonna be right here. So they can say, I don't really think this is actually a case. It doesn't look like it's enough for me. There's this valid reason that seems to be there that explains what somebody complained about, then they can close the case right there. Or if they feel like it's substantiated, that what's going on in that home is egregious enough that it rises to the level that we would consider it child abuse or neglect, then they have some choices. They can say, yeah, but it's not good enough and send the child home without services. I would really hope they don't do